Okay, so welcome everyone to Color, Texture, and Abstract Photography. And again, this is about channeling your inner creative artist. What I wanted to do is start in the art world with some of the most creative, abstract artists that are pretty popular. So I'm going to show a series of images on the next 3 slides. And I want you to, as you're looking at them, for each slide, what is most striking about the slide? And then we'll talk about these 3 slides before we proceed into photography. So this slide has Georgia O'Keeffe and Vincent van Gogh. Just take a look at this. What are the adjectives you'd use to say what is most striking about these photos, or paintings rather, sorry.
For Van Gogh, I would say it swirls. It just reminds me of dancing, doing some kind of swirling dervish dance. And then O'Keeffe, I would say the color is just dynamic.
Anyone else?
Well, I would say even for both of them, there seems to be a lot of movement in both of the pictures.
I like the way they draw your eyes to certain parts of the picture.
Yeah, there's the swirl leads you in, or the way in which Georgia O'Keeffe just brings you into the middle. Anyone else?
Lots of contrast.
Yep. Contrast, light, vibrancy. Are they realistic?
No. I would think that Georgia O'Keeffe is more realistic because it's based on a flower that you could almost get that from the real flower.
Mm-hmm.
And then the town in the Van Gogh is real, but the sky is what's a little unreal.
So what do you think Vincent van Gogh is trying to communicate?
The vastness of it, the awness of it.
Yeah, and how little the town might be in relation. From these two, think about the vibrancy and color, because as photographers, we also want to have those dimensions come into our photographs, that the more vibrant, the more color, the more they emphasize what we're feeling, the better the photo is. So now I want to move on to a different type of abstract art. And the first one is Picasso. That's from his Cubism and a little bit of his blue period. And then Escher, who I don't know how many people, when we were growing up in the 70s, a lot of it was in the dorm rooms. I don't imagine why, but we had there's also the famous one of the two sketching each other. But what are you seeing in these?
Well, Picasso, kind of a Madonna holding a child, or if it's still in the womb, I'm not sure, but very bizarro as usual with his Cubism. In Escher, I just see a lot of flowing around with all the stairs, climbing, and then straight across and down and up again, and a lot of movement there.
Escher is using a two-dimensional media to kind of show and confuse what 3 dimensions could look like.
Yeah, like what's up, what's down? Am I trapped in it? You know, like both of them, as opposed to the first two pictures, what feeling do you get when you look at these two?
I think they challenge your thinking.
Picasso is warmth and comfort.
And Escher?
He challenges your perspective. He's encouraging you to look at different angles will let you see different things. And on a different day in a different mood, you'll see different things. So it's a challenge of never looking at the same thing twice and never seeing the same thing twice. So challenging yourself.
And I'm going to show you two more as we get more into the further away. What we started with when you looked at the O'Keeffe and Van Gogh, even though they weren't realistic, they represented a little bit more of reality. And then we moved to the middle, which is a little bit altering of reality. And now we come to Salvador Dali and Jackson Pollock. So again, what do you see in these?
The Jackson Pollock one, I see that color will make all different kinds of perspectives. You can look at just the whites, you can look at the yellows, you can try to follow the blacks. It's just line and design.
Dolly reminds me that time is dead, or something is dead, or melted away in the hot desert maybe, or something to that.
And how do these make you feel?
Well, his depressed, but Pollock confused, jumbled.
And what tones are we seeing that are similar in these two?
We're seeing a lot of the same tones. The reds are more vibrant in the Pollock, whereas it goes more toward orange in the Dali. And the Dali is more specific to what he's painting, where the other is just so random.
And how do these colors contrast with the ones on the first slide from O'Keeffe and Van Gogh?
Well, these seem to be warmer colors as opposed to the ones in the very first set, which were blues and pale, like roses, where these are sort of the opposite on the color wheel. The yellows, the reds.
More muted than vibrant.
Yeah. So what does all these three slides teach us about being photographers?
There are places that you can go that aren't just very realistic, like most photographs are.
And the use of color.
The color changes mood. You're very,
Yeah.
Other comments? I know some people have been quiet, and in this type of session, some people like to be quiet, some people like to contribute, but anybody else who hasn't contributed, any thoughts?
Well,
think,
go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
now we're just waiting each other out. I was just going to say every picture is showing a specific message and a feel without taking things too literal. It's an exercise in expanding what the message can really be. It's exploring your eye, your expression, and seeing how far you can push yourself to see and present the feeling and the message that you want to, and sort of having fun with it all.
Sort of seeing the world differently, but with intention.
Exactly.
I was basically going to say the same thing, that you are always conveying some sort of message, whether or not the audience gets the message, you don't know, or how they're going to perceive it, you don't know. But in any photograph, there is always some kind of message.
Yeah. And a lot of times what happens with photography is we're so focused on all the technical part, and also on looking at, can I get this subject perfectly, that we forget about those other elements. And so that's the theme for today. And photography, there's photography that's photojournalism, that you want to show the reality, and then there's photography that becomes more of an art form. And so today we wanted to pull you into more of the art form and just look at some techniques. But this is all today about vision, about how you see the scene. So a good thing, what we mentioned is that abstract photography, just like abstract art, is less about the subject and more emphasis on light, and deciding whether you want a bright, vibrant, like the Georgia O'Keeffe, versus more of the subdued of the Dali, Salvador Dali. And whether you want to be harsh edges, Picasso, a lot of times, and particularly in Cubism, his edges are harsh, whereas Georgia O'Keeffe, most of the time, is off-flow, color, warm, cool, vibrant, subdued, texture. Are we showing something smooth, rough, soft? Countless variations of what you can do when you're trying to just capture texture. And then composition. A lot of times our composition guidelines or rules are more about symmetry and balance. And as we look at this type of photography, sometimes you want to be purposely out of balance, dynamic and static. I think Dennis said in the beginning ones that both Georgia O'Keeffe and Vincent van Gogh use techniques to draw you in and create motion and movement. Do you want your pictures to have an open edge so that you feel like they're vast and continuing, or are they closed and simple? And there's no right or wrong in any of this. So this is what we want to focus on today. So as I said, it's about vision and imagination. And so the first thing is to use your vision and see lines, shapes, colors, and textures. And particularly, a lot of times I've been talking about shadows and highlights. As a photographer, that's what creates the contour and the dynamic part of your photography. And then looking at things, rather than looking up at the sky and saying, that's a cloud, really changing your focus and saying, what is that shape? Is it a puffy little ghost? Do I want to just have a realistic cloud, or do I want to create that feeling of just clouds floating? And then looking at built objects for that repetition of geometric sort of continuing lines and textures. So those are what we'll focus on. So this is not my picture. This is Washington State. It's a famous area that people go and look and photograph the fields there. But the picture on the right is a basket that I brought back from Africa. And I took a picture of the basket. And the reason I'm showing these two, oops, sorry, I was trying to move people. The reason that I'm showing the two is if in the house I can find that same type of swirl in an object that's common and then capture it, it will let me, when I do landscape photography, look for those same swirling edges. So what I did is I walked around the house and said, what do I have in the house that is sort of somewhat interesting, and captured it. And my basket has vibrancy, it has movement, and it has texture. Everybody can see that. And I just snapped it and then cropped it with my camera phone. And the reason why we want to do that, this is a photo I took in the Falkland Islands with my camera phone. And so rather than stand up and take the picture, what attracted me was the movement of the rocks towards the dunes and the grasses. And if I had taken this from standing up, it would be a totally different picture. Again, having that vision to see where do you want to be in terms of being able to see those patterns. And this looks like somebody purposely put these rocks down and created a path through the tussock grass, but this is natural. Mom Nature created this incredible journey of rocks. So the other thing we want to look at in photography is for lines and detail. And the lines, we oftentimes think of leading lines and edges as being those that are part of like a roadway or a fence. But nature has incredible amount of leading lines and edges. And these two pictures, again, were taken with my iPhone using the close-up feature on the iPhone 11. And so just looking for us to just down on a rainy day, instead of saying, oh, it's a rainy day, then oftentimes on a rainy day, I just put my iPhone in my pocket because I really don't want my regular phone to be to get wet and damaged, although I have had them out in the rain too. But you know, when you walk down the street, don't look just at a piece of grass. Is that, you know, what does that grass have? What does that leaf offering you? And where can you position yourself to capture that sort of texture and lines and interest on the different objects? So look for lines and look for detail. The grass was sort of difficult because, again, if you're using your camera phone, you have to position yourself so that the background does blur. So I probably took 15 different pictures of grass with raindrops on them. And I think a person who joined us today, our third Laurie, her husband came along and said, "What are you taking pictures of?" And I'm like, "The grass." So it's, again, having that vision of saying, I can do something interesting with these textures and tones. This one is not my picture. This is, I picked it up from a stock image, but I really liked it. And if I had a little bit more time, this would be difficult to get with my iPhone. But for those of us that have cameras that adjust your depth of field, to get this swirl effect and the leaf, what they did was, number one, angled where the camera was, and it's a really shallow depth of field. You can see that all of this is blurred, and I think they did it in camera rather than afterwards, just in looking at it. And instead of the focus area, whoop, sorry, my computer sometimes goes ahead. Instead of the focus area being here, which is the natural thing I would probably do as a photographer, I'd say, oh, I need to focus at that sort of point of interest. You can see that they put their focus point up here, which made it really an interesting design on the leaf. So a couple of things for those, again, that are using more advanced cameras, the angle of the camera, the light, seeing the lines, and then thinking out of the box and saying, I'm not going to put my focus point at the point of the swirl. My story is the lines coming in. And also, when we talk about the color wheel, these complementary colors, red opposite green are always really, really, really nice combinations. But I just love this picture. And now I will think about, can I find a swirly leaf like that? Houseplants tend to do that when they're opening up. And so I'm going to keep my eye open to see, can I find that sort of venation, and then not have my temptation of saying my focus point has to be at that point of inside the swirl. But really nice job here. Again, this is a stock image. The same thing, the camera is extremely close. This could be done with a smartphone. You can see that the focus area is in the middle drops, and there's less depth of field to the left and to the right. And the reason that's happening is that these leaves are forward on the plane of focus versus the ones on the back. And so again, usually in my sort of trying to break out of the box, I might have cranked my depth of field up really high to be able to get all of the drops in focus, but that wouldn't make as compelling of a picture as having just the leaves in the front have that depth of field and having the other leaves drop off behind. So, you know, if you're in the field and you have a situation like this, you know, take a few at one depth of field, then try another depth of field, try another depth of field. But first you need to see, just as I did with the iPhone, the water drops and not the fact that it's just a crappy rainy day out there. So water on plants is always really, really fun. And you can, if it's not a rainy day and you've got light, you can also bring out just a little spray bottle and play with adding water to vegetation and seeing what it does. So again, lines, details, light, color, purposely deciding where your focal point is. And so with the smartphone, you would tap this center area to make sure your focal point is there. And a lot of times with these detail things, I look for a situation where the camera phone will not keep wanting to focus infinitely on that background, because it thinks you want to take everything in there. So I oftentimes will look for vegetation with something behind it that will soften the background. The next thing is to really look and see the patterns and things. This is a peacock feather that I took with the iPhone. And it just, you know, again, a lot of times thinking out of the box, people want to take pictures of the eye of the peacock feather. And I decided I'm just going to go with the sort of chevron, sort of blues and aquas and different colors. So I decided just to do that. I also discovered in taking pictures of feathers is that when you get really close to them, if they're damaged at all, you know, it sort of breaks up the pattern. So you have to have just the right feather or move around on the feather to be able to show that detail. So this is a feather I found in the house, and I did a very bizarre thing with this feather. I was sitting at my computer, and I have windows, and different scenes will come up because I haven't changed my screensaver or my opening yet. And so this one was one that Microsoft had a picture of probably Zion or Bryce or one of the canyon areas. And my feather was very brown, and I had been like moving it around the house trying to get some light for the feather. And so what I did is I had my husband hold the feather up to the monitor, and I wanted the light coming behind the feather. And all these tiny little squares that you see, that's the actual monitor, that the way the light's coming through. But it created this incredible sort of effect. And I did this with my camera phone, and all of a sudden I have this sort of, really interesting effect of a feather that was somewhat damaged, but and I kept walking. I tried it up to a window, but I didn't like what was happening behind the window. And so I just said, these colors, and I was really hoping that Windows wouldn't take away the opening screen so I could get that look. But somehow those two things clicked together for me, the background colors of the sort of mountains, and said, hey, why not use the light coming from the monitor as a way of lighting up the feather. So this one is a picture of a tulip that was taken with a macro lens that I put on one of my older iPhones. And what I wanted to do is channel my inner Georgia O'Keeffe. So I just kept getting closer and closer with the macro lens to try to get that sort of effect. So flowers are always wonderful for abstract because you can focus on just a portion of them, and they have natural, wonderful lines. And as we saw in the Georgia O'Keeffe one, something that zooms you in or brings you in or gives you that feeling of warmth. So a few things about close-up photography, because a lot of the abstract photography, you do want to get close. And close-up or macro photography does take a little bit of practice to get it right. And the reason is because the closer you get to subjects, the shallower your depth of field will be. That's true of your camera phones, it's true of your other phones. And the amount of depth of field that you can have will depend on the lens on your camera. On your phones, some of them do have, the more recent your phone is, there is a macro setting on your phone. And on the iPhones, you tap on, when it comes up, there's a 0.5, a 1, and a 2. Make sure you tap the 2. And sometimes when I tap it on my iPhone 11, it goes to portrait, but it should come up with a separate wheel that you can then zoom further in. Before I had the iPhone 11, I did buy macro lenses. Again, on other presentations, I've said it. If you buy the $20 lenses, they're a whole lot better than the $9 lenses. And you have to get incredibly close to the subject when you snap on those lenses, and keep your subject from moving as you're getting closer and closer with the camera. If you're using a camera that has a lens on it that allows you to your depth of field again on your macro lenses oftentimes will go to f22 or higher. But just if you go back and you remember that picture of the swirling leaf that I showed you, they purposely used a shallow depth of field so that only the lines coming in on the top would be in focus. So just because you're using macro, if I'm using macro photography and I'm up in Linden when the trillium are out, and I want every single piece of that giant trillium to be in focus, I'm going to use as much depth of field as I want. If I want to get creative with it and blur the outside of those petals and just focus in on the middle, I'm going to use a very shallow depth of field. And it's going to change if I'm using my zoom lens. I have a 1:400 lens that lets me do macro. I will have more depth of field to start with because I'm further away from the subject. And I'm happy if anyone wants to, after the holidays, do a whole thing on depth of field again, because it is not as simple as just setting your f-stop. It depends on the subject. It depends on how far you are and which lens you're using. So again, with close-up photography, be very purposeful about where your focus area is. On that swirly, beautiful leaf that I found the photo of, again, purposely, the photographer did not focus on the middle. The photographer focused on the lines coming in. And the same thing when we start to do abstract photography using a close-up lens. With your smartphones, no matter what brand it is, if you tap on the smartphone, it will control where your focus point is. Macro photography, if you're going to use more depth of field, remember your lens opening or your aperture is very, very small, that little peephole. So the challenge with macro photography always is to have enough light to be able to illuminate the subject as you have less and less light coming in. So a lot of times tripod, and with a smartphone, if you don't have a lot of light, just hold on and go in burst mode, because especially when I was using the clip-on lens, a lot of times I'd be close to the object and I was moving it. So the burst will help you stop that motion. And most importantly, watch your backgrounds. Backgrounds are so important, particularly with close-up. I try to do that with photography, with wildlife too, because sometimes 3 steps to the left, 3 steps to the right, and you're going to have a whole different, less cluttered, less complex background, unless you want it. And then the other thing, if you want detail in your subject, the more parallel your camera is to your subject, the more detail you'll get on that subject, because it's all about plane of focus. So if you're taking a picture with your smartphone, and I know that the iPhones, if you have your grid up, which is an option, there's a level in there. I think there's a level on some of the Androids too. The more level it is over that object, the more depth of field you're going to get, because it's all about the plane of focus. If you start to move your camera, and a lot of times I see people holding their camera phones at an angle as they're taking a picture of something down. The more it's straight and parallel, the more depth of field you're going to get. Because if I angle the camera, I've lost some of my depth of field. But in abstract, purposely angle it, because you can then change and emphasize the front versus the back. But be aware of how you're holding your camera. And that's true also of the pro body cameras. I have a level that I had that when I look through my viewfinder on one of my cameras, I've got a level like that to know, am I level or not? Because I have a tendency, we all do, to move our cameras up and down, and that will change the way the lines look. So that's a little bit about macro. I'm gonna do a little bit of technique in with different things. Textures are really, really fun to do. Just looking at textures. This is a cedar tree taken with a smartphone, and I just love it. You know, it tells me sort of the history of, you know, geez, what did this tree go through? And I like the more chaotic. It's sort of more of my with these textures, you can be more Jackson instead of George. But I just love the fact that there's textures. And again, with your cameras, particularly with the iPhones, you know, I moved around until it was composed to have those textures sort of filling the whole lens of the camera. So textures are really, really fun to capture. And so there's textures all around us for the people with us who knit or crochet. Just look around your house and start taking pictures of the textiles or items that you have and play with them. Can you get a fun sense of lines and a fun sense of textures and movement? Because again, this sort of knitting reminds me of standing on Skyline Drive and looking at the mountains. And so if you can see it and position a textile to capture that, when you're standing out and you're looking at the mountains, now you're looking at what are the shapes and how do I want to compose this picture? So experimenting and playing again with textiles. I've shown this picture before. This is leaves at the Ginkgo Grove at Blandy, which the last time I checked the site, they said it was nearly close to being peak, and thought that over the weekend the ginkgos would be at peak. And this one, I did not put these leaves on the ground. I just walked around until I found 3 leaves that were overlapping like this. And so that message to me is you're at the Ginkgo Grove, there's 150 trees there. And everybody's trying to take pictures of all the trees. And I'm like close up, fascinated with the shapes of the fans of the ginkgo leaves, which are really, they're like needles of a pine tree. And fascinated with the color. And so I just walked around and walked around until I could find that composition of leaves. The leaves intrigued me more. The grove is really difficult to capture as a whole and get it attractive because there's also lots of people running around doing insane things there. And I like the lines coming in. I like the overlapping of the fans, the changing of the colors, just again, looking at details sometimes when you're in an overwhelming scene really makes for beautiful photography. So then also textures, and I started thinking about if I had, if this had been another time in history, I probably would have done a lot of abstract photography by going down to DC and doing some buildings and things. And I'm sort of homebound right now. So I started saying, what can I find in my house? And there are some real funny little treasures I have. And this is a shaker little basket that was my parents'. And I just love the detail of this is the cover and the handle. And, you know, all I wanted to do is capture all those intersecting lines together. And again, done with my iPhone. You know, just what I love about capturing this is you can see the tooling even on this little wood and the little wood dowels, that how it was put together. And I've always liked this wood, and being able to sort of do something artistic with the wood to show texture and movement and lines. You know, I started discovering I have all these sort of things at home that are just really are really interesting lines and coming together. And I didn't see it before. I usually see the entire shaker basket. And shapes. This was a tree that is just a dead tree that was down on the wood lot next to me, and it looked like an eye. It looked like an elephant's eye or a dolphin, or, you know, and I just saw that. And again, had my camera phone with me, and you notice that. So my focal area was up in here, and it falls off here. There's no detail down here. That's what you get with a camera phone, but the detail is up here, and that's where the eye goes to. And so, is this a dead tree? No, it's a sort of mystical creature lying in the forest. Again, shapes, lines, textures, light, reflections. You know, the standard way that we as photographers like to do reflections is to have a perfectly still day with it mirrored, so you don't know whether you're looking at the sky and the trees or whether you're looking at the water. And this was at Elizabeth Furnace, and it was, of course, a little bit of a windy day, and Passage Creek tends to always be moving. And I did not alter this in post-production at all. And this is the way it looked. And it was far more interesting. And I think this year it's going to be true with our colors, is that the reflection was far more interesting to me than the actual trees, because it created sort of an impressionistic picture. You get the little detail of the leaves floating down, and then just the trees and the lines. And so look at what you see in water, because you can do some really neat things with water. And on a still day, a slower camera speed, shutter speed, will create more of the movement effect. The faster speed will create more of the stopping of motion. This was moving fairly rapidly, but the light was beautiful. I kept just looking at the light and saying, oh, it's just such pretty. And, you know, and so using reflections to create those abstract designs are really, really always great to do. Oops, gone the wrong way. Shadows. This time of year, we have great shadows if we get some sunlight. They're really long and fun. And so this one I found in clip art. I am certain that this is a composite, and that what they did is they took the shadow picture and then they took a picture, it looks like through crinkled paper, and then they put them together. But it's sort of a neat effect that shadows don't have to be dark and gloomy. They can be really fun, or they can be dark and gloomy, Sid, if you want to do dark shadows. But the picture on the right is, again, one I took. You know, I had the concept of wanting to go out and find some growth rings on a tree to have that sort of message of, you know, here's this tree that is still communicating to us what it saw. And as I was working with my phone, I kept getting annoyed that the phone was creating shadows. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to put my hand and create a shadow. So I wanted to have that sort of position of like the idea that you have on a tree, you have this history and its growth rings, but on your hand, you have your finger prints, and you have the swirls, and you have the damage and scars, just like this tree was scarred right here. You can tell, if you know anything about growth rings, that something happened to the tree at that point, because that's where you're having some scarring. But, you know, so you can play with shadows to create some really, really cool effects. I was playing with, and I didn't capture quite the way I wanted to, shadows of leaves on a log. So you had textures and shadows rather than leaves themselves. I just didn't get the light right to do it, but I had to have that concept. And then we were on top of Little Stony Man, and my husband hates his picture taken. And again, it was like towards sunset, and the light was great and the shadows were great. And so the only way I could capture the moment is like to create shadow people of us And I know it's Little Stone Man, and and a lot of times when I've traveled, I've traveled a lot for work, and then I'll throw in a little side trip. And I don't like my picture taken, so I have shadows of me in many places because I can see myself and go, wow, I can get that. And this is sort of obviously, if you know us, that's my hair and my husband's hat and his glasses, and just sort of a fun thing to do. Look at shadows, because if you can get the right shadows, particularly if you have pets, easier to do with dogs than cats, or kids, grandkids, get them in a shadow and you can create really, really fun distortions. Or yourself, like again, this time of year, we have such long shadows. You could do a shadow of yourself like all the way down the road. You could have a leading ledge and leading lines, and then have you like, completely filling the road. And you can do ghosts, that's the cool thing. So watch a lot of times, like yesterday when I was trying to take pictures of those cedar waxwings, I'm like, darn those shadows, but shadows can be your friends when you use them creatively. And then it's really important to understand light. So I started playing with a flashlight or an external light in a dark room, and I have my stove is black, so, and it's shiny. So I decided that I wanted to purposely do some really just cool things with light. And so I ended up playing with the egg. And the reason why this is important to do is that you start to understand when you're outside, where's the angle of the sun, and where do you want, again, the highlights and the shadows, and how do you get a reflection, and where do you want to have that reflection? And so, and these are taken, again, with my iPhone. If I had had a little more time this week, I would have set up my macro lens and really, really played with light, because you can do really cool things. The story of the egg and my yellow tomato is just very different than if I had just taken it straight on. And you're a better photographer if you understand source of light. And so one of the things in the next 2 weeks is play with an object and change where that light is purposely, just to get it. Do you want the reflection up and down, or do you want it coming on a side, on an angle? And it did take some work to get these objects so the light was just right, but had a great time with it. And these are external light. It's not a flash that you would have on the camera. You can do it with a number of different objects. And this was pretty cool too. This was again with the iPhone, with the strawberry, and you can see this is my stove. This is where I just wanted to get sort of the reflection, and I did a lot of things with the strawberry, playing with it. I put a light under it. I put and tried to shoot it, the light coming through. But the more you play with light and the more you understand light, when you get into natural light, you'll understand how to create a scene that changes. If I had the strawberry lying down, I had a reflection this way. And I would purposely change where the strawberry was and where the light was and where I was in relationship to the light. This is a lot of trial and error, but understanding source of light makes you an incredibly better photographer. And then the nice thing about this is you get to eat your subjects afterwards, after they've done their job. So create a mood. I had a concept of, at first when I set this up, and again, it's with my camera phone, which is incredible, is so I needed something that I needed a really dark background. My first concept of what to do with my little Buddha and the candle was I wanted the candle in the front because I thought it would illuminate the Buddha's face better. But the candle was too big. No matter what I did, it was just really annoying me. And the other thing that was happening is that too much focus was on the candle versus on the little Buddha. So I had to play with it to get just the right effect. And so again, with my iPhone, I did my focus area on the face because I didn't care if the candle was in focus or not. And I purposely underexposed it to get rid of the background because I was getting so much light from the candle. I really wanted it darker. So playing with candles with a shiny object like this is really fun. And then being able to create sort of this sort of scene. You could be in Bhutan in a temple, not in my kitchen with my iPhone. And the thing about, I can tell you, having been to Bhutan, so one place you cannot take pictures is inside the temples. And they were incredible. And I was like, oh, you know, so this, I've recreated the feeling of having been, you know, like up in the tiger's nest in this incredible area. And think about this. This is a little candle and, you know, a little Buddhist statue. And all I did was played with it until I got the feeling, the light together. Just really sort of fun. And it did take, with all of these things, it takes a little bit of trial and error to get it just the way it is. You know, how do I want the statue? How do I want the light? I did crop it a little bit. I did do some post-processing just on the camera phone itself and added some blacks and played with it a little bit. But if you have a candle and you have something, look at it. I also started playing with, it didn't succeed. I have some, like a crystal vase, and I was trying to take pictures through it to get some light. But, you know, again, objects around your house that you can transform into a different way of looking and being. Again, it will make you a better photographer when you're outside to say, how do I want the light? How do I want to create mood in a scene? So then I started getting really far out and decided to, I read this article that said, you know, like change your perspective. So this, believe it or not, is a metal kitchen spoon. With my iPhone. And I just, again, started moving it around to emphasize the holes. Now the spoon has a curved edge on it. You could use a colander or something else, but it took a lot of sort of playing with it and again trying to get it in a neutral area to create this sort of bizarre modern look of, is it a spoon or is it a spaceship? And so the next thing that happened is things started coming out of my kitchen cabinets to say, oh, what can I now do with this? Can I change this to be something else? And it was sort of like a little bit of fun. And the reason that you would do an experimentation with a spoon to try to change its angle is because, you know, a lot of the great abstract photography in cities are changing the perspective to get those lines, to get those arches, to look at the light. So it's not just, can I make this spoon into something else? Can I see the angles? And again, this sort of goes back to the Escher painting of the stairs, and can we change perspective and make you feel, this one makes me feel trapped in a city, which oftentimes I do feel trapped. Very different if you just took it flat on the buildings. So then continuing along the theme of my kitchen, you can sort of take and look for repeating patterns and take something common and make it feel less common. So this is my cheese grater, which I also played with putting a light. I have an old-fashioned metal cheese grater, which is really cool because the plastic ones just don't do the same. But I just started changing different reflective light on it, and this is the small side. And on the other side of the cheese grater, I put a green light in it, and I have something that looks like a spaceship coming out. I just started playing with light reflecting on the cheese grater, and then just, again, in the iPhone editing app, just sort of change the color temperature of it. So you can sort of create sort of cool repeating patterns. This is again, a stock image, but rather than the picture of the glass, taking it down and the light sort of takes something common and makes it uncommon, so look around. And then I started looking around my house to say, what else do I have that I really like? And I have the picture on the left is a blown vase with different colors on it. And I, again, just shine light through it and focused on the pattern on it. The picture on the right is a African instrument, but rather than take a picture, the instrument has strings and the whole face, I decided to just focus on the eye and sort of channel my inner Picasso with these things. And as I started looking around the house, more and more, the things I've collected have these sort of strange patterns and vibrance, and I can do more with them. I can recreate with those sort of things I've collected, my little treasures. Different than the shaker basket, but still there. So then I started deciding I was going to do some combining of textures. And I'm going to show you what I did here. This is, now I'm starting to get more and more sort of bizarre. The original picture is a little dish I have of a zebra from Africa. And then I combined it with the texture I found. So here's the evolution of it. I started, the bowl is sort of brown and very African earth colors. And I just took a picture in the bowl. And then I decided first, I wanted to get rid of this area and this area. And I did all of this in Snapseed. And I can send out the link to Snapseed for those that are first joining us. And I was sort of happy with the recreation of it and adding a little vibrance. And then I was outside again, wandering around, and I have reflectors in my driveway and light was coming through them. And I took a picture, and this is all done with my smartphone, of the reflector to get the pattern. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. But again, seeing that and seeing the light, and then I combined them to create sort of this different type of cubism look. And the way I combined them was really, really simple in Snapseed. I opened up the picture of the zebra and then went to the Snapseed menu for those of you that use Snapseed. And one of the options is double exposure. And when you click on double exposure, it then opens up this menu, and there's a little thing here, and that's when you open up the second image. And then I opened up the second image and said, wow, this is pretty cool. And you can then change it. You can lighten it, darken it, add, subtract, overlay. You can do some really funky things with putting two images together. So I haven't practiced and done anything, but that texture of that nice cedar tree I have, maybe I can use that. And it's fairly easy. Again, Snapseed is a tool that you can use on your Android or your Apple device. You can use it on an iPad, you can use it, but you can also do double exposures in many other programs, including something like Lightroom or Photoshop, or there's some other ones. But think about the possibilities of sort of having something and then just transforming it. So that was just a sort of, again, fun experimentation. So then color. This is a sort of picture I took of using water and oil drops. And this is, in this part, I'm going to go into more of like the things you can do to alter reality. The first part of the presentation, and the most important, is starting to see the color, the shapes, the lines, and things that are common that you can photograph and use and alter. This one was more trying to say, well, what can I do with color and with drops? And this is sort of, you have to have a little patience and a little bit of crazy to want to do this, and an area where you can get a little bit messy. This is another picture with a picture with adding oil drops on it. It's a picture of leaves that I had and then added oil drops on it. So how do we do that if you haven't done it? You need either a bowl or a piece of glass. And I did use I have an iPad as well as an iPhone. And the reason why that was really sort of fun to do, you can put any picture underneath, but the reason why using an iPad with this technique works is that you have some color coming through it and light. And so I picked I just went online and I picked a picture of lots of colors in it. And then I started by just trying to put water on the glass. And I had my iPhone. I didn't have my tripod with a camera. It would have, you know, again, with a setup with a good macro lens, you can do more. And I tried water at first, and it really did do it. This site was recommending doing a clear dish that you would put on the water and then adding a mixture of water and oil. All the dishes I had, unfortunately, had writing on the bottom of them, so that was annoying. And I said, nah, I can't use any of my baking dishes or things because they've got water on it. And I didn't have blocks of wood. I just had like little, just 4 things to lift it a little bit. I had it a little bit closer to my iPad. So I said, after a lot of experimentation, oh, what the heck. So I had some olive oil and water, and I put it on the glass, and that seemed to do it. It created isolated oil. And I used a dropper to put the olive oil seemed to work better. I tried baby oil, and that was a mess. It just went everywhere. But the olive oil worked really well on the glass. So that was sort of a fun experimentation. I still have towels with olive oil all over the house, and again, a lot of trial and error. You can also do this effect by using a post-processing one, but I wanted to try to do it. So I'm going to show you again sort of what happened. These are all the olive oil and water bubbles that sort of created this really cool effect. The same here. And again, if I had a little bit more time this week, I would have gone with my macro lens and just try to really hone in on the bubble and not the whole scene. I just used my iPhone over the whole setup that I had, and kept trying to get the cat away from it because she was quite interested in what I was doing. A couple of other techniques that you can use, and I haven't been real successful at mastering this technique yet. I more enjoyed sort of seeing the natural abstraction and lines and colors and shapes rather than try to do it mechanically with my camera. But if you have a zoom lens, you can do swirls in and out. And the trick is you need a slow shutter speed because you need your shutter to stay open the whole time you're moving your zoom in and out. And this does take some practice. It's better if it's on a tripod so that you're just stabilizing it and not moving the camera while you're doing it. So what you do is you find, like if you go into the forest and you find like a really nice burst of color of leaves, you can set up either on shutter priority or on manual. Get your shutter speed to 1 to 4 seconds. And then before you sort of have to practice pressing your shutter speed and zooming the ring of your lens in and out to be able to get this sort of in and out feeling of swirl of what you're taking pictures of. So if you actually start turning your lens a little bit before you fire your shutter and then come back. So swirl in and out. Those are swirls. To me, I just make a mess out of them. But some people get good at it, and if you've tried it, that would be a fun thing to experiment with. And the other is swipes, and it's the same thing. You can expose while you're moving your camera up and down, and you start moving the camera before you fire your shutter speed with a fluid motion. You have to have nice colors to do it, and continue moving as your shutter fires. Again, I'd rather probably, I haven't been successful at those two techniques. And then to really reimagine something that you have, the moon's been beautiful and we have a blue moon. So the other night with my 1 to 500, I took this middle picture of the moon, and it was really cool. You know, I love getting moon pictures where you can actually like zoom in and see the craters and picture what's going on there. And I sort of like crescent moons a whole lot. The way you get a moon picture is I purposely ask folks because the moon's really bright and I just wanted that dark and light contrast, and my camera kept wanting to make it lighter, but I kept exposing it so that I got, you know, the detail of the moon. And then I said to myself, well, what if, you know, this month's a blue moon? What if I had a blue moon? What if I had a purple moon or a pink moon? And to create this sort of abstract little composite, I did it all in PowerPoint. I just created the lines, and then in PowerPoint, it let me change the colors. So I'm going to try to do that now. Let me go back to share the screen. Every time I go out, here we go. So if I click on this middle picture in PowerPoint and you go to format, there's a color option and it lets you change the colors of your picture. And that's as simply as I did. It wasn't, I didn't have to do tons of Photoshop or different types of things. I just said, I wonder, and my first concept was I just was going to make the middle blue because I had this concept of a blue moon. And then I said, this is sort of pretty cool that I could get this repeating look. And then I decided I'm just going to create this. And then I used the same colors and I just did 2 boxes, and I took the shading or the middle, I had transparent, and then sort of created this look of sort of this modern piece that, you know, someone might, you know, picture putting up on your wall or somewhere, of just saying, here's my interpretation of the moon. So you can, again, I didn't want to spend a lot of time with all the tricks and techniques you can do in post-production. There are programs that are for your camera phones that will purposely do swirls. There are programs that will take something that you've photographed and you can pick a different artist and have that artist type of work be reflected in your picture. There's a million different programs out there to do that, but I more wanted to focus on looking around the objects in your house and looking at how those objects have different textures, lights, lines, features, colors, and saying, what can we creatively do with those different aspects?